So we did our 45 minutes on a Saturday at 4 o'clock and a happy hour.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to start streaming it now and see if it shows up. All right, there we are. Oh, I have to hit play. So this is what it will look like when people pull it up.
Okay.
So there's me. Well, there will be you, and then
Right.
your PowerPoint will be right
Okay.
there.
All right.
And right now it's just me watching. So.
How long is the program for your wife?
She is supposed to, she's taking one class over the summer, then then she has a class in the fall, and then comprehensive exams in the spring. And then she'll take her oral comps, and then she can start her dissertation. And then that could take 1 to 3 years, depending on it. Yeah. I'm not sure if anyone is watching right now, but if you are, thanks for joining. We are going to get started around 6 o'clock, but we just thought we'd start the live stream a little early so that people could jump on. If you have a YouTube account, you are welcome to comment in the comment live chat section. We are going to be taking questions through there towards the end of the presentation. So thank you for joining, for coming on. Bear with us. We wanted to start the live stream a little early so that everyone could get on, so no one misses a part of the presentation. So if you just joined, we have a live chat section that you're welcome to comment on. We'll be taking our questions from there. Or if you would like to, if you for some reason can't make the live chat work, you can email me, Taylor Mason, the associate pastor here at Kirkwood Baptist Church, and I'll announce that email address once we start so that everyone knows it at a time. So just hang with us for a few minutes. Thanks for joining. And if I'm looking off in the distance, I'm talking to Carla before we start. So thanks for joining, and we'll be with you soon. Yeah, you can say Reverend Mason, but I'm the associate pastor, like an associate pastor here. So I just want to say thank you. The right thing. Hey, we got someone else just joined. Hey, welcome. 5 people joining, watching. Once again, I'll just say we're waiting until more people get on before we start the presentation. Thank you for joining us this evening. Carla is going to come on in just a minute, and we'll start our presentation about the role of advanced care planning. We're excited that you decided to join with us tonight, and it should be a lot of fun. Who would have thought that a conversation on advanced care planning could be fun? But it should be good. So thank you for joining with us. If you just now joined and haven't heard, there is a live chat section on YouTube. It should be on your right-hand corner if you're not in full view, like full page view. And that you can write comments to us. We can see them in real time, and later on towards the end of the presentation, we'll be taking a few questions and answering them. So if something is brought up in the presentation that you're unsure of, feel free to write it in the live chat section. So we're going to take just a few more minutes so that people can get on and start watching, and then we'll begin the presentation probably around like 6:03. I'm assuming like 6:03. I think would be good to give people plenty of time to get on. So hope you're doing well. Hope you've had some dinner, maybe not. Maybe 6 p.m. is too early for you, but 6 p.m. I'm really hungry right now, so that sounds good to me. For those of you that have just joined in view, we want to say welcome. We're going to get the presentation started in just a few minutes. There is a comment section on YouTube that you can write any comments or say hello, or if you have any questions about the presentation, you can do that. That's a way that we're going to be able to take questions towards the end of the presentation. So thank you for joining us this evening. And we're going to get started in just a few minutes with the presentation. So just hang with us, and we'll start right around 6:03. Welcome. It is 6:01. We are on our way to starting the presentation, but we're just giving a few more minutes for people to hop on and to be a part of the presentation. We have a live chat option. I know if you've been watching for the past like 10 minutes, you're tired of me saying this, but we have a live chat option on the YouTube page that you're watching. Yeah, hey Dave Eden, thanks for commenting. You are welcome to write in the comment section, and that's a way that we are going to answer your questions. So thank you, Walter. Walter is my grandfather, all the way from Newport News, Virginia, watching. Very excited. So thanks for commenting. So we're going to get started in just about one more minute. We're going to let a few more people join, and we'll start the presentation, and we'll go from there. So just hang with us. Give us a few more minutes for people to hop on, and then we'll get going. And once again, the live chat section you can comment on, and it's a way for us to answer questions for that you might have for that presentation. Welcome. I just saw a few people joining. So welcome. We're going to get started in about one more minute for the presentation. We have a live chat section that you can either say hello or ask questions during the presentation. We'll be taking questions towards the end. Carla is going to come on, and also to let you know, in the description below the video should be a link to all the different documents. And in fact, I'm going to check that right now on my iPad just to make sure we have that set up. But those documents will include the PowerPoint for tonight. It'll also include multiple documents that Carla will be referencing, and maybe something that's good and important for your just you going through the process. It'll also provide the advanced directive that you can fill out, since we're going to be talking about that a lot too. So let me make sure. Yeah, if you scroll down into the descriptions, it should all be right there. You can hit the link, and it should download a PDF of each one of those. So feel free to click on that, download some of the documents ahead of time if you want. The PowerPoint is included, so that should all be there. So yeah. All right, well, we're going to get started. So thank you for joining. We're excited that you're here. This is Advanced Directive presentation by Carla Baum. Carla is a senior healthcare executive based here in St. Louis with extensive experience in older adult living, acute care, and rehab. She served as vice president and network executive at the Lutheran Senior Service, as president of St. Joseph's Hospital in Kirkwood, and as president of SSM Rehab. She now currently serves as an older adult living consultant. Carla holds certification in advanced care planning, respective choices, is a licensed nurse home administrator, and earned her master's in healthcare administration. And her community service includes board of directors, Kirkwood Historical Society, board of directors at Leading Age Missouri, and a board chair at Almost Home. So Carla's done a lot of things. She's an expert in this field, and we're very excited to bring her here on YouTube for you. So as soon as I set up her PowerPoint for her, she's going to come up and she's going to start our presentation. So here is Carla. Thank you so much for being here. We're very excited that you are here with us today.
Yeah. Well, good evening, everyone, and I thank you for joining me and for Reverend Mason giving me the opportunity to speak with you and present a topic that could not be, I think, any more timely than where we are in our world today. And so I thank you for the time to maybe make your thinking about this change a little bit, or to be that nudge that gets you going and completing an advanced directive. As Reverend Mason said, there are a lot of attachments to this presentation, and other than the PowerPoint, it's probably okay for you to just listen to me, and I will walk you through each of those attachments towards the end of this. So really want you maybe more just to listen, and then I will be glad to entertain questions at the end, or you will have email that you could reach out to me after we're done. So let's begin. So what matters most to you? And maybe we're going to talk about a term that is not as familiar, called advanced care planning, but I'll define that in a little bit. But I think the real topic is what's those things that maybe aren't on the top of your mind today, but maybe when we finish will be. Meaningful Life. I am the founder of Meaningful Life, and I decided it was something I wanted to do in what I call my third act, and have done the certification through Respecting Choices to be able to talk with individuals in groups about being more comfortable about those end-of-life conversations. Sometimes they scare us to death, so we avoid them. And I'm hoping that I give you some tools today that make it easier for you. My services are free. This is a purpose I found in my life at this time. And so you make me happy if you will sign an advance directive. That is my goal. And I also provide notary services free of charge, because in Missouri you'll see that that's a requirement. So you'll have a link to my website towards the end. So talk about life changing just like that. What were you doing on February 28th, 2020? Well, I'll tell you what I was doing. I was sitting at the St. Louis County Library, and I had gone there to see an author talk about a new book that she was promoting. And they had that library crammed. There were over 800 of us sitting in the library, right next to each other, could barely walk. And it was probably the last time in 2 months now, almost 2 months, that I have been in a crowd that big. We talked about the coronavirus as part of just a conversation with the speaker, but I don't know that any of us knew what would happen to our lives. So what were you doing on March 28th? Well, I can tell you, I was at my home looking for something to do and finding something that was productive and figuring out how to go to the grocery store and those kinds of things. But in 1 month, We have been asked to adhere to things that are adjusting to our own safety. And what are you doing today? Well, here you are. Instead of us having had this on March 25th in person here at the church, we're doing this through the way many things, aspects of our life are doing virtually. And I'm grateful to Reverend Mason for having the talent to do this. I started counting my days on March 16th because the March 15th is the last time I went to anything. I went to church, and I haven't been back to church since then. So I count this as day 37 of my stay at home. But question is, how much longer will our lives be changed? And as Reverend Mason and I were talking earlier, I don't know that anyone knows that, because it depends on testing and vaccines and things like that. But what is our new normal? Okay, you see words on here: social distancing. I don't know that that term existed prior to this. Washing your hands. Our hands are raw. Wearing face masks when you go to the grocery store, to the pharmacy. Wearing gloves. Small groups of 10. Well, we don't even get together in small groups of 10. I can walk down the middle of the street in Kirkwood in the middle of the day because the streets are empty and businesses aren't running. And then we've all seen the unprecedented unemployment, and we've probably looked at our financial portfolios and then just set it aside. But the list could go on and on about what's the thing. I would bet many of you know someone who's had the coronavirus. And how did it change their life, your life? I had a former colleague who had a staff RN that died at the age of 43. She's not in that age range. That should have been a high risk. But, it has raised fears in all of us. And we don't know what the end will be. The end is probably not the right term, but what is that next phase of this? But anyway, it keeps us all on edge. So this has become a very personal thing for us because we don't know who we're around and who is a carrier, but not necessarily an active, in disease. So there are some assumptions, and I would say I'm in that high risk category. Many of you may be listening or fall into that. I talked about fear, but it does cause us to pause and reflect on our lives and our loved ones, and we want all of our circle of friends and colleagues to be safe. I can't tell you how many times someone said to me, "Stay safe." I would guess that some of you are prepared with appropriate documents and your family knows your end of life wishes. But then I would bet there are some of you that have thought about it, talked about it, but failed to act. We have a lot of focus on the heroes in healthcare right now. And if they could say something to you, what would they say? They fear that many patients end up in the hospital and they're confronted with challenging questions. And what makes me sad as I watch this is that people are alone. They're alone when they're critically ill and they're dying alone. And family members can't even say they love them, can't even be in the same building. So when those critical times come, or those critical decisions, these are things that you would have to think about. Would you want to be kept alive on a ventilator? Would you want to have CPR done if that happened to you? What do you want if your condition changes so quickly you can't speak for yourself and a decision has to be made? Based upon pre-existing conditions, your life and your health may have gotten very complicated, and what choices will you and your family and the healthcare professionals face? There are a lot of articles written about this right now, and so these questions came out of those articles that are being presented by physicians, nurses, and those that are actually seeing this happen. Do we have choices? And the answer to that absolutely is yes. And we do have the ability to take control by being prepared when we can no longer speak for ourselves. And, it's one thing to be in a crisis or to have some drama going and trauma going on in our lives. But the real good time for this kind of discussion and the decisions I'm going to push you to is when you're not in a medical crisis, and instead when you're healthy and you can think through things with a clear head, or you're not in treatment and you don't feel well. So it is more important than ever that your loved ones and your healthcare team understand what matters most to you. I love this quote. I have an advanced directive not because I have an illness, but because I have a family. And this is the gift you can give your family by being clear about what you want, and then they give you the gift back because they honor and respect what your wishes were. So this is an important step. So here are some terms. We've talked already about advanced care planning, and it is really the overarching process of taking time to reflect about what's important to you, to write it down, to ask questions, to do some research, and then when all of that is clear in your mind, then it leads to an advanced directive. And as you can see here, an advanced directive is really the legal document that gives the person you choose to be when you can't speak for yourself, to make decisions. That person there's a number of different titles. So healthcare agent is one, proxy is another, durable power of attorney for healthcare. So all of those are the same name, but they are the person that you name when you can't speak for yourself. I want to clarify here, this only goes into effect when you can no longer speak for yourself. So I think it makes people nervous that they're not agreeing with in life, or something could make some decisions, but it takes 1 to 2 physicians to be able to activate an advanced directive when you can't speak for yourself. So those are some terms we'll talk about throughout here. So you'll say, okay, yeah, this is good, this is easy. But the reality is that 90% of us say that we want to talk to our loved ones about end of life, but you can see that only 28% of us actually have done it. 80% say, I want to talk to my doctor if he or she gives me a diagnosis that causes me to pause, and only 7% actually have that conversation with the doctor. And what happens is then the doctor directs that based on their thoughts, not your thoughts. 60% say that making sure the family's not burdened by tough decisions is important, yet almost 60% of you never get it done. 82% saying it's important to put it in writing, and yet 23% have actually done it. So you can see that one conversation can make a bunch of difference. So I break this down into 4 steps. The first one we talked about is identifying your values and wishes in writing. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the questions to pose to yourself. Then the second is selecting that healthcare agent, which is a critical step. Fourth is we're going to complete the advanced directive, and then the third one, and then the fourth is you're going to share the documents, and we'll talk about who are the key people to do that with. So defining the quality end of life, and I've got a list of things here that might help you think this through, and so your values about life, maybe your faith structure and how that influences your goals and your beliefs. What are those fears or angst that you have? What experience did you have with someone you know in your family, or you watched relatives die and maybe it was a good death, and you say, boy, I would really like that. If I could pick how I went, that I liked how Uncle Joe went. And then you may also have the example of Aunt Mary that suffered all the way through, and they did all these tests, and at the end of the day, it didn't do a thing to help her live. Your preferences, your needs. Sometimes when we get diagnosis, particularly if we have multiple diagnoses that we're working with, we need to educate ourselves about those medical conditions and not assume that the doctor will take the time to explain all of that to you, or how it will work with you as you age and that disease process advances in your body. So there's a thing called the internet, and people go on there and can Google, but you need to take time and learn about your conditions, because that will then help drive maybe some of the things you want to tell your family. Um, your opportunity to then sit down with someone and actually have this conversation is then much better defined if you have been that detailed, and then they can ask questions. And one of the other things that I think is important is to write a letter to your family about those things that you want to say when you can't speak for yourself. So as we go through the materials I've attached, there is a letter that we'll talk about as an example. One of the things that I think is important about what you want to have happen at the end of your life are those things that you never want to happen. So you may feel very strongly that I don't ever want to be on a ventilator. And if you got COVID-19, there's 10 to 15% of the people that end up on ventilators. Or you may not want to have feeding tubes, or you may not want to your very best effort to not die alone, or you don't want to die in a nursing home. So those are the things that you kind of think through, and I'll give you a tool that will make you think about a few of those things. But if your wishes aren't written down, that healthcare professional, rightfully so, is going to do everything possible to save you. And is that what you want? And if the answer to that is yes, that's good. And if the answer to that is no, then that's fine, because they're your wishes. But if you don't speak for yourself, they will make decisions for you. Knowledge is power. As I talked about needing, let's say your doctor says you have congestive heart failure, and you know that there's certain patterns about your health, and you go in and out of the hospital because of you get fluid or those kinds of things. But the best thing you can do is about educating that and what will be the course of that congestive heart failure. So you can learn about that. But when you go back to the doctor, you need to have a list of questions that you can ask your doctor, and so that you make informed, educated decisions and not be shy. This is your life, your death, and you need to have the confidence to speak to that physician about what's important to you, ask questions, and then make your own decisions. So I'm going to talk about a few facts. And so CPR, for example. Did you know that if you're in the mall and you drop and your heart stops, that for them to start CPR, that it may result in you being on a breathing machine for a period of time. You probably are going to end up in ICU, and you're going to have some damage to broken ribs. That's kind of a given. And here are some statistics about CPR, because I think we all watch ER on television or the medical things, and everyone drops. They do a little pumping on the chest, and the person gets up and probably goes to work the next day. But that's not always the way it happens. So CPR performed in a hospital on adults with serious illness, and they live, at most 15 out of 100 will leave the hospital and live an average of 4 months. CPR performed outside of the hospital, so where we all live in our community, 5 out of 100 will leave the hospital and live up to 1 year. If you live in a residential setting, in a skilled setting, something like that, and you get CPR and live, 2 out of 100 leave the hospital and may live up to a year. Well, I saw these statistics. It kind of took my breath away, but these are validated data. So maybe you learn something with this data, and it makes you think that through. It is an individual decision, and it needs to best match your values. But maybe you think about it differently now. This is an important one with COVID-19, breathing aid decisions. So if you're facing that decision about short-term help with breathing, here, the options that you will be presented with is a ventilator, and that is a tube in your airway that gives oxygen to you, but you cannot speak or swallow. And unfortunately, you may not be able to get off the ventilator, but it will extend your life. If you don't need that, you may instead have a non-invasive airway, a mask. That mask that you see that's on goes over your nose and mouth. It'll help for breathing problems. For example, if you have pneumonia, but not something that may be as serious as COVID. And then there are the options of just comfort measures, and so you will have the oxygen machine at home and are hooked up to a long oxygen tube just to make sure you're comfortable and have the O2 levels that you need. So those are some decisions to be made about breathing aids. Tube feedings is another one of those decisions that will be on your advanced directive that you're going to have to decide what you want to do with. And so you may remember a few cases. Missouri is not known for too much, but there are two cases. Nancy Cruzan, well, not in Missouri. Nancy Cruzan was in Missouri, where she was in a vegetative state, lived for years on a feeding tube. That there went to court. There was a lot of laws that are changed now because of that. So long-term feeding tubes for a period lasting longer than 4 months, it is how you get nutrition and water, and it's fed into your stomach via a tube in your belly, and it is done at home, can be done at home. Sometimes they don't know if your gut and such is a long-term issue or maybe more of a short-term issue. And so they will do a tube that goes down your nose into your stomach, but you can see here it doesn't. That is not a long-term answer. And then others, your last option there is comfort feeding, so food and water. You eat whatever you want, whether it's chips, ice chips, or oral care. But even maybe you're going to aspirate, but if that's what you want, that's what your advanced directive would say. I have, going back here, in the packet you will have 3 decision aid tools on these topics, so you can look at that in much greater detail. Selecting who you use as your healthcare agent is probably one of the most important decisions you're going to make. And it's not always the person that you think most naturally. It may be your spouse or significant other. Many people go with their oldest child because they're the oldest, but yet they may not be the one that has the temperament to do the right thing when things get, there's a lot of angst about things. So it is a key decision. And I think the piece that you have to ask of your healthcare agent is, will you honor my wishes even when you don't agree with them? So you may not have made the choices that the person asking you to do, but it doesn't matter. When the time comes, you need to know what's in the document, you need to understand what the conversation was, and then you stay true to their wishes. And you will see in the document I give you to consider filling out, Missouri gives you the opportunity to name 3 agents, healthcare agents. Only one at a time would be able to do the decisions, but in case something happens, they're not in town or they move away or die or whatever, then you're going to go back and they could go to the next person. You don't have to have 3, but you have the opportunity to have 3. So in Missouri, it requires a notary and 2 witnesses for an advance directive. And on the links that I have provided, you will see the Missouri Bar Association form. And I have, you have a link that will take you to that website if you'd like, because if you want to look through their webpage. I'm also giving you a form that allows HIPAA sharing of information. So a completed advance directive for you would be this form, the Missouri Bar Association form, and then there's a form for HIPAA. And so it allows the medical professionals to share information about your conditions with your healthcare agents. And then once you've completed that and it's notarized, then it is time for you to share your documents with key audiences. And so I've listed a number of them here. Physicians, of course, not only your primary care, but other specialists that you have. Each one of them should have one. Your loved ones, your family, for sure, but then your healthcare agents, your clergy, EMS. I would say you take one of these documents and you put it on the refrigerator door. EMS knows to look there for medications and other kinds of information and contacts. And then when you go to the hospital, maybe it's for a routine test like a mammography or an x-ray, then take one with you because the hospital will then scan it into their electronic health record. So it's there the next time you come. But keep it handy. This is not something you can put one in the safety deposit box in the bank, but if it's not around where people can have it, then it doesn't exist. They will act like you don't have it. Once you do an advance directive, it is not a forever document. It does not have, you can be in the hospital and have documented you don't want certain things to happen, but then something happens in the hospital and you change your mind. You have the right to change your mind as long as you can speak for yourself. You know, want to always get rid of the old one so that you don't by default end up with something, but you can speak up, and because you have verbalized it to the medical professionals, they will listen to that. I would say minimally every 5 years you need to look at this because we're all aging. We all have health challenges. Maybe treatments for certain conditions have changed, and the options of your recovery is greatly enhanced. Or if there is a change in condition, so you have gotten a new diagnosis or some unplanned event happens, like a COVID-19 virus. But make sure you destroy the old one. And this may be a time, if you are one of those individuals that have your advance directive, maybe this is the time where you pull it out and you look at it and see if what you've been witnessing in that, would you change it? Now, I've had questions from people that say, my advance directive says I don't want to be on a ventilator, but what if I got COVID and I ended up in the hospital and I wanted them to at least try me on a ventilator? Then that is what you would say to them in the hospital when you can still speak for yourself, or you would take your current one and then mark on it and initial it and date it so that someone knows you've done that. But once you've given the agent your information, they then have the right to speak your mind, because you're never going to talk about all the potential things that could happen to you as you die. So what that agent does is take a trend of what you all talked about, and this is what I think Carla would want, because we talked about this, we didn't particularly talk about that situation, but I think I have a sense of what she would want. And so so you may not want to go back and change your document, but then articulate that you want something, you want to try something for a while, and then if it doesn't work, then go ahead and take me off of it. I've talked a lot about having that conversation, and there is data that says 6 months after losing a loved one that depression rates are lower in families that had the conversation. The idea that you have taken the time to articulate your wishes allows them to not have so much guilt, and they'll have grief, but they don't have to second guess, did they do the right thing? They don't have to be that family that we all have seen standing in the hall in the hospital arguing about what mom or dad really wanted. And each one of us may have a different opinion about what that is. And so the fact that they know your wishes, instead of being in the hall and creating a lot of family angst, they can be around your bed, they can be with you, instead of holding your hand and having those conversations about funny times for the family or sad moments, or telling you that they love you. And that's how I would begin to define a quality end of life. So I'm going to tell you about Lacrosse, Wisconsin. And I heard this story on NPR in 2014, which is how it eventually got me to doing what I'm doing today. I don't know if any of you know of Lacrosse. It's about 7 hours northwest of here, 50,000 people. And they started a journey in 1995. It was led by Gunderson Health System, and they kept getting frustrated by people coming to the emergency room or showing up in the hospital and dying and then getting started on things, and the family would say they never wanted that. And well, they didn't know what they didn't, and so they did what they thought was right. But they made it a community-wide effort to look at education and setting a cultural standard for anyone 18 years and up. And they have successfully performed this at 95% of anyone coming to the ER or dying in the hospital in Crosse, Wisconsin has an advance directive. Now go back to a slide I talked about earlier where that was probably in the 25 to 30% range for the rest of the country. So for them to do this for 20 years is a remarkable thing. And this town of 50,000 people has the lowest end-of-life care cost in the United States. And why is that? Because they have reduced the amount of readmissions, the going back and forth from the emergency room or to admissions into the hospital only to be sent back after a 12-hour stay in the emergency room. That it takes a toll on anybody, but if you are already, your health is compromised, it just helps your time to go faster. Time in the ICU in the last 6 months has decreased. Why? Because people have said, I don't want those kinds of heroics. And then hospice admissions have increased, and the length of time that someone is in hospice is much longer because people have said, I want comfort measures. And, it's not unusual for a hospice provider to open a case and to have someone die in the next 3 to 5 days. In Lacrosse, that length of stay is going to be much longer in hospice. And then when they have gone back and done satisfaction with families about how did things go at that end of life care, you can see the 90+% satisfaction. That lowest end of life care cost didn't happen because they didn't do things, they didn't withhold treatment. It came because they did what the person asked. And so that person didn't want those things. And that's a significant milestone for a town of 50,000 people. So I think it's time for all of us to think about having that conversation. And it's whatever decisions you make about end of life are good ones because they are yours. I can't tell you what's the right or wrong way to make a decision about whether you want CPR or such, but that's where your heart and your gut have to take you there. But I can tell you without those documentations or the conversation being shared, that team of healthcare professionals is always going to go to full code. And they will perform all measures necessary to sustain life, regardless of what is going on. If you have a terminal cancer illness and you don't articulate what you want, they will do everything they possibly can. And I think the COVID-19 virus gives us an opportunity to use the downtime we have, the time for thought and the time for reflection to take a bold step and to begin to do your advance directive. So I've talked about meaningful life at the beginning, but how can I help you if that is would be of any interest? I do educational sessions like this, but I meet with people one-on-one and we have conversations. And you ask me what the questions are, I bring the documents, and then give you some tools to help think that through. I've got a lot of different documents. The Missouri Bar Association form is just one, but it's one that what I've given you is a fillable form. Sometimes you're a little nervous about asking your physicians some questions, so I'll help you. I'll be that party that helps you get those ready so for your next visit, so you can do that with confidence. There are times when families don't agree on this, and People have very strong opinions about it. And so sometimes I can be a neutral party and I can be that person that doesn't take a side. I'll just kind of help listen to the conversation, provide some maybe clarity and some other experiences, and maybe get the group to a point to support the wishes of the person trying to complete the advanced directive. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I am a notary, and sometimes I tell you, finding a notary could be a hassle, and that's why things don't get legalized, is because they're not notarized. That's free of charge. Or if you have an advanced directive and there is something that's changed in your life and you need to update it, then you can do that. But all you have to do is reach out. So tonight I have given you a bunch of attachments, so let me walk through each one. You have the Missouri Bar Association form. I don't know if you can see this.
And that one is titled Electronic Durable Power to Attorney on the description page, just for people watching.
If it's entitled Electronic
Durable Power of Attorney.
Electronic Durable Power of Attorney. And then the HIPAA form is with that. So you'll get both of those when you link on that. And then there is also a booklet that the Missouri Bar puts out.
That's called Full Booklet, Durable Power of Attorney.
It's called Full Booklet, Durable Power of Attorney. It looks like this when you print that off. So it helps you, kind of coaches you through how to complete that advanced directive. The next item I list there is, it's called the Conversation Starter Kit. And there is a wonderful resource called the Conversation Project. And that starter kit has questions and that kind of prompt you to think things through and take notes. And so before you get ready to complete the document, you may want to go through that starter kit. That is yours. You mark it up, whatever. The next item I provided is a flyer about myself and what I do. It has my contact information on it. So and then I have a letter that is a sample for you. It's called Don't Panic, It's Okay. And it's a letter written by a physician to her family. And this is a very touching letter. It says, if you are faced with a decision that you're not ready for, it's okay. I'll try to let you know what I would want for various circumstances. But if you come to something we haven't anticipated, it's okay. And if you come to a decision point and what you decide results in my death, it's okay. You don't need to worry that you've caused my death. You haven't. I will die because of my illness or my body failing or whatever. You don't need to feel responsible. Forgiveness is not required, but if you feel bad, responsible, or guilty, first of all, don't, and second of all, you are loved and forgiven. If you're faced with a snap decision, don't panic. Choose comfort, choose home, choose less intervention, choose to be together at my side, holding my hand, singing, laughing, loving, celebrating, and carrying on. I will keep loving you and watching you and being proud of you. I think that letter says it a lot. I think it says a lot for many of us, but you can do anything like that. I have taken the opportunity to write one to my family. I got more wordy than that. It's two or three pages. But when I can't speak for myself, there is still a document that tells them I love them. You have the PowerPoint, which we've been using. I've also given you a sheet with the decision aids that we talked about, CPR, breathing aids, and tube feeding. And then there are two specific items related to COVID-19, and one is from the Conversation Project, being prepared in the time of COVID-19, and then one from Respecting Choices, which is the organization that influenced Lacrosse, Wisconsin, called Proactive Care Planning for COVID-19. So those are all there. Take your time, look through them. Some of them you may want to print off and look at, but just know that you have a lot to study. I'm also providing you links. So these are websites that you could go to. One is the Conversation Project. One is mine, One Life, One Decision, One Story. One is respecting choices, one's the Missouri Bar, and then another example of an advanced directive is called caring conversations. I think at the end of this, when we finish and you reflect on this, our ultimate goal, after all, is not a good death, but a good life to the very end. And Atul Gawande has written a wonderful book called Being Mortal. And I have attached also a list of book resources for you if you'd like to, go on Amazon or somewhere and buy some of those. But at the end of the day, it's about a good life to the very end. So I am open for questions if there are any. Mason?
Yeah, let's wait just 1 second while we get a few in.
I hope this has been something of you found a gem in here somewhere, and that maybe I'm making it a little easier to begin to think about how to have this conversation with your family and your loved ones.
Are you familiar with the Five Wishes booklet? And if so, what do you think of it? By Joy Jolliffe.
Joy asked the question.
Mm-hmm.
Joy, I understand you asked a question about the Five Wishes directive. Yes, I am. Many people love that one. I think one of the differences between, let's say, the Missouri Bar Association and the Five Wishes is the Missouri Bar is more of a checklist and prompts you into making some decisions. And if you wanted to put some additional material thoughts on there, like your letter or additional thoughts about your service that you want to tell people about and things like that, then you would attach it to the Missouri Bar form. The Five Wishes really gives you more, it's more of a narrative kind of advanced directive, and it gives you lines where you prompts you with those five wishes questions to answer that. So it may be a personal style preference. If you go online, they have Five Wishes has been charging $5 for you to use that, but I do think during this time with the coronavirus that they are waiving that $5 fee. So you would just type that in the internet and it should come up.
I got another question from Jordan. She said, "Advanced directives are different in each state? Question mark. Should people fill out new forms if they move?"
Okay, so the question that are advanced directives different in every state? Unfortunately, yes. It would be too simple if we all did it in one way, but that's not the way it is. So in Missouri, as I mentioned, it takes a notary and two witnesses. In Illinois, if you go right across the river, it is it's one form. It's about, I think it's maybe 2 pages, and it takes one witness, no notary. So yes, if you were moving states, you would need to figure that out. I would say that if you have an advance directive and it has your wishes on it, I think they would figure out a way to honor those if you've not been able to make that transition to a different state. But you do need to check that out.
Another question would be, sometimes people's advance directives aren't looked at in the moment of decisions because family members are insisting on CPR or life-sustaining treatment. How can we make sure our wishes are respected by doctors even if a family member disagrees?
So the family is there's a lot going on with someone and they have an advance directive, but the family doesn't agree with it. And so how do they make sure, the question is, how do you make sure that the healthcare professionals listen to it? The advance directive is a legal document, and so it should be the piece that drives it. I had an attorney do a presentation with me one day, and someone in the audience asked the question, well, I don't know why I do this, because I was talking to this couple I've known for a long time, and the wife said, "Oh, I just finished my advance directive, and I put down my wishes." And the husband said, "I don't care what you have in your advance directive because I'm going to do whatever I want to do." And the attorney said, "That's not it. He won't. He should not. Would not be allowed to make those decisions if she has done that. If there's not a document, then he does have and will be asked to make those decisions." So I think it's important to for families to be advocates for the person that perhaps is dying, because we need to keep that advance directive and those wishes in front of the healthcare professionals and remind them that there is an advance directive and that decisions should be made in that framework. So it is easy for people to want to be the Monday morning quarterback about, well, mom didn't really mean that. Well, if it's in writing, then at some moment in time she did, and it needs to be honored.
Another one I had is there anything you would recommend people writing in on their advance directives that isn't already on the Missouri form?
Boy, that there could be a lot of topics we could talk about, and I think one of the things to think of, one of the resources I provided you is the conversation starter kit, and there are a number of questions there. For example, let me find it here. On page 4 of it, it says, do you want the doctor to tell you everything about your condition? Or do you want to just, if you have a terminal illness, do you want to know how long you have? Or do you want to just kind of say, I'm going to live my life and as long as I can and do what I normally do? Do I want to die at home? How long do I want to receive medical care? So these questions in this document about a starter kit should help come up with more things. And if you use the Missouri Bar, I would say you do want to attach some additional thoughts to it, because there really isn't a place for narrative, but I have several pages attached to mine. I use the Missouri Bar form, and so it's all part of the packet. So you'd make copies of all of that for your loved ones and your healthcare agents.
I don't see any more questions unless you want to make one more push.
Any more questions? We'll take a second, but you will see on the attachments I have an evaluation that I would ask you to complete for me. Now, you can't fill it and send it back, but if you would, I would love your feedback, and if you could take and get my email address off of my flyer, and then just put evaluation in the topic, and then write down question, just put the number 1 down, and then whatever your answer would be. I think there's 5 questions I ask you to rate, and then just put the number and whatever your rating would be, and then hit send. And I don't, it's you want comment, there's a place for comments, but I really do want your feedback so I can do this better or cover some topics that maybe we didn't do this evening. Any last questions?
I think that is it. Yeah, that's all that I have. Just for you, multiple people said, thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. Thank you for sharing, Carla. Thank you so much. You did a great job having all the documents that we need in one place. Don't panic letter is such a gift to the grieving loved ones.
Yes, well, thank you for that feedback. And my last slide is just my contact information. I live in Kirkwood, so I'm nearby. If you need something notarized, even in this time of social distancing, we can figure that out. I have done 5 of notaries this in the last 3 weeks, because people are taking it. It is a top of mind, and they are taking action. And so we meet someplace in a neutral place, and we keep our distance. I put the paper on a clipboard, I hand it to them, and we go back and forth. We have masks, I have gloves on. So don't let the social distancing right now be a reason not to finish your document. As I said, you'll make me a very happy person. This is the purpose of why I started Meaningful Life, and I hope it makes a difference in your life. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you once again for joining tonight. We hope that everything has been helpful. Just as a reminder, the links to all the documents that were mentioned are at the bottom of the video. You can download everything there. And the PowerPoint also can be downloaded and has all of the slides from the presentation. So if you need anything else too from the church, from Kirkwood Baptist Church, you can always contact us at the church. And my email address is tmason@kirkwoodbaptist.org. Thank you so much for joining, and we hope you have a good rest of the night. And we hope to see your advanced directives coming in so that we can get that percentage up. And we hope that the conversations that you have with your family in the future going forward will be really meaningful for you. So thank you once again, and we will see you soon.